Hello my bike riding friends, here we are with another Bike Bros video. This time we're looking at the 2022 Marin Rift-Zone Carbon 1. So for those people who aren't super familiar with what we do here on this channel, we pretty much look at bikes, look at specifications on bikes, talk about who the bike is going to be suitable for. In some cases we make some comparisons to other bikes. And the goal is, by the end of one of these videos, you kind of know what's going on, what makes a bike good or bad, who should consider it, and this is going to be another one of those videos. So this is the 2022 Marin Rift-Zone Carbon 1. It is the lowest price point Carbon Rift-Zone. Marin does make two other versions of this. And then there are also 3 alloy Rift-Zone 29ers priced below this one. And then the Rift-Zone name is also shared actually on some 27.5-inch wheel bikes. 3 different versions with alloy frames and none with carbon frames. So this particular bike, the Rift-Zone Carbon 1, a 2022 model, is $46.99 in Canada, $37.99 in the United States. It seems no matter how many times I say that, in just about every video there's somebody commenting that our prices are out to lunch and they don't realize that we are in Canada. The shop, Bike Bros, is in Cochrane, Alberta, Canada, and we are proud sellers of Marin, Giant, Rocky Mountain, Pivot, Niner, Esker. The entry-level bike here, it's not going to have all the zippiest, best of componentry, but I would say at $46.99 with a carbon main frame, this bike with 125 millimeters of travel in the back, 130 millimeter travel fork, and spec highlights like this Shimano Slx 1x12 drivetrain, Fox DPS 3-position rear shock, carbon frame that I spoke of, and Marzocchi Bomber Z2 suspension. I would say that for that $46.99 price in Canada, $37.99 in the States, this thing is a killer value. One of the highlights on the bike, as far as I'm concerned, is the geometry. We have a 76-degree seat tube angle, a 65.5-degree head tube angle, and a 480 millimeter reach on this size large. So those are all numbers that I would call progressive, certainly not old school, but they're not crazy progressive numbers. And what that does is helps the bike to kind of get the benefits of being long, slack, and low, but by not being super progressive and being that meaning even slacker, even longer, it means that it's a little bit more of an all-rounder bike as far as its attitude, although it is very capable and kind of begs you to be ridden extremely hard. One of the outlying things about the geometry on this bike is the fact that the rear end length on this bike is 425 millimeters, and that is the same rear end length on all the different sizes of this bike. Some of the other bike companies are going with frame size specific rear end lengths. And while there are benefits to doing that for some riders, I don't think it's always a benefit going that way. I personally, being a size large, there are a lot of bikes that I wouldn't be interested in because I don't like how long they have made the rear end length on their size larges. I prefer a shorter rear end length on a bike. I find it makes the bike a little bit more nimble. It helps if you like sort of manualing through rollers, or if you like jumping off everything in sight. That short rear end is just something that adds to the playfulness of the bike. So getting back into the spec here, we have Shimano Slx 12-speed derailleur. We have a little bit of a discrepancy between what the website, the Marin website, and what we're actually seeing in real live bikes, because this bike has a Shimano Derailleur 12-speed 10 to 51 tooth cassette on it, which also means that it's running on a Shimano hub to have that micro spline system. The specifications on their website say that this is going to be an 1151 Sunrace cassette and on a Marin branded hub as opposed to a Shimano hub. I think this is quite the upgrade to get the Derailleur cassette, because it does help to improve shifting a little bit because of the sophistication of Shimano's ramping sort of tooth profile and everything that they have on their cassettes. That is a heavy cassette. That's the one comment you'll see quite common about any bike that comes with a Derailleur cassette, is they're heavy because all of the cogs on there are steel. So this bike is a 32.5 pound bike in this size large. So one of the things I would say that is, do you call it a bad thing? It's a standout thing because I think this is a little bit heavy for the amount of travel, but its excuses are things like that cassette, and also the fact that the tires out of the box are set up with tubes, although they are tubeless compatible. The rims are taped to be tubeless already, so it is a quick upgrade, and you could probably get this bike down to say 30.5 pounds by taking out the tubes and maybe doing a switch out of that cassette. The tire spec is a really nice one. Rear tire, a Maxxis Aggressor. That's a popular rear tire, pretty smooth rolling, and just because of the profile of all that stuff on there, it's not going to wear super fast. It's a 29 by 2.5 in that wide trail position, which means it's designed for a rim like this, which is 30 mil internal width, EXO casing, tubeless ready. Front tire is a Maxxis Assegai. Once again, this is maybe the one of the most sought after front tires out there for having incredible traction. It's a little bit of a slow rolling tire when used front and back, but if you're going to have extra traction, you're going to want it on your front tire, so a great choice here. So it's an Assegai 29 by 2.5 again, EXO casing in the tubeless ready casing. That EXO casing just means that these aren't the toughest, thickest, heaviest in the Maxxis tire world. They are more the kind of casing that would be suitable for a trail bike. So the rear end design is a linkage driven single pivot. So that is your main pivot there. We then have another pivot on the seat stay. If that was down there, this would be a horse link bike, but because it's there, it is a single pivot because that rear axle is going to rotate in a simple arc around that main pivot. Those forces then go through this rocker link and then drive the shock vertically. Speaking of the suspension design, there are a lot of bikes that talk an awful lot about the sophistication of their suspension designs. This is the low-tech way of making something that actually works incredibly well. As we've seen from companies like Marin, like Commensal, single pivots can be engineered to work incredibly well. This isn't a brand new frame for 2022, but it is a brand new color. This is, everybody that's seen this in person is really liking these looks, the black to red fade, and then what already looks like blood splatter on there. It looks really good. It's not too out there. I don't think that this is one of those bikes that's going to look good and then in 2 months you're going to get tired of it. It's just good looking. There's our Rift Zone logo on there. The thing that says it's carbon. The cool thing is when you actually, in person, if you get a chance to check one of these out, this isn't actually just black up here. I hope that this video brings it out, but that's actually a clear coat over the raw carbon underneath, and so in the right light you can actually see the different layup sheets of carbon that are happening under there. Brake cable routing is, or brake shifter and dropper housing is internal, comes out to come around the bottom bracket. Rear derailleur comes out underneath to come around the bottom and then back inside. There's some nice chainstay protection on here, so that's going to both keep things quiet and keep the chain from getting carried away on bouncing around too crazy. The dropper on here is a Trans X dropper, and they are getting into pretty appropriate seat post drop amounts depending on size. In this size large and in the medium, they're using a 150 mil drop. In the extra large on the spike, they use a 170 mil drop. And then on the size small, which is the smallest size they make, it's a 125 millimeter drop. So I think pretty appropriate without getting carried away. When I was riding this in a size large, I could easily run a 200 mil dropper, but I have quite long legs and I'm 6 feet tall. Of things to potentially criticize on here, so I'm a huge fan of the geometry. I think the suspension works really well. The spec highlights are that cassette and derailleur happening there. The rear shock, being a Fox DPS, is really awesome. That's about as trustable as you get without getting into the really Gucci shocks. That lever there sticking out to the left like that means that you're in the open mode or the plushless mode. When I rode this bike, I just rode it in that mode all the time and didn't do any switching back and forth. But you do have at least the ability, that's in the open mode. That's your trail mode when it's sticking down like that. And then out to the side, that is your locked out or extremely firm mode. So you do have some sophistication there. Of course, the red dial up top, that's your rebound adjustment. But I find the suspension works really well. Frame is really, really stiff. Drivetrain, shock, fork, this Marzocchi Bomber Z2. These are all highlights. This is a 34 mil stanchioned fork. It is basically what I would call the entry-level budget version of a Fox 34. So Fox owns Marzocchi, so this does bring some Fox-ish technology to the table. A little bit of a more simple rail damper here. Still an air fork, 34 mil stanchion. You still have your rebound adjustment down the bottom. It's still a through axle. It's boost spacing front and rear on here. So it's the important stuff on here is all of really nice quality. The only thing that I would say major that you may or may not find adequate enough is these this is the entry-level 4-piston brake from Shimano. So it's not entry-level, but it's an entry-level for a 4-piston version. Depending on who you talk to, some people have been surprised by actually being happy with these brakes, and others find that it's something that within a couple of months they're wanting to upgrade. So that is a potential upgrade, but not a must, depending on your riding style and your sensitivity to braking power. The saddle on here, super plain Jane. I think that saddles must be one of those things that they're struggling with supply right now. These Trans X posts are a pretty nice operating post. I'm just gonna use my armpit to push that down while we're talking about this stuff. And then at least you can get an idea of the nice, satisfying sound of a firm top out in your dropper when it's pushed up. There you go. Handlebars, 780 millimeters wide. Stem, I believe that's a 35 mil long stem. It's a little bit of a chintzy looking stem. I've never heard of anybody having issues with it, but cockpit stuff, I find people quite often just want to get something blingy for handlebar and stem because that's what you're staring down at while you're riding your bike. So an upgrade that isn't necessary, but a lot of people would potentially choose to do. The grips actually feel pretty good. They're a Marin lock-on grip. The remote for the dropper is a pretty nice feeling alloy remote. So nothing to complain about there. And that is a bit of a highlight of this bike. So who is this bike for? I would say that this is a general purpose, this is a trail bike. And that in my mind means that it is going to be as rewarding when you're pedaling hard and going uphill as it is when you are blasting downhills. You aren't, as you're going up, feeling like you're just struggling on the ups to enjoy the downs. Neither are you having a bike that is ultra efficient on the way up and then just terrifying on the way down. I personally sort of call this a short travel enduro bike because when I rode this, I found you could ride it really, really aggressively and take it to lots of places where the people around you are on longer travel bikes and you're doing just fine. It can handle some stunts, some steeps, some high speed, some long pedaling days. It really is a fantastic do-it-all kind of a bike. The one person who I would struggle to recommend this to would be an extremely small, light rider. So because this is 32.5 pounds, once you're talking about really small, light people, I think that you have to consider weight that much more. It means that much more to small, light riders. Whereas for somebody like myself, 180 pounds, 6'1", anybody probably over about 160 pounds, the extra couple pounds this has over some other competing bikes really isn't a big deal. And you do have to take into account that this has a carbon mainframe, SLX, one by Drivetrain, some really good suspension bits, and you're getting it for under 5 grand Canadian, well under 4 grand USD. And I don't know of anything else that you would get a combination of lighter and even close to the same spec as this bike. Geometry I think is really good. Like I mentioned, it's progressive, but not so progressive that it's going to make it hard to ride and not mean that you're going to have to just always ride this thing as if your life depends on it. You can actually relax a bit. You don't have to be like leaning on your arms to make sure the front wheel is going to be weighted. What else do I want to say about this? Really stiff. Short travel enduro. These are my little notes that I have written down. This is what I look at when I'm reading things off to you. I take a couple minutes just before filming just to kind of make sure I don't miss any things. Upside, geo, stiffness, spec for the dollar, and the looks. This thing is dead sexy, especially if you look at the old version of this. I love what they've done. So, what do you think? Is the Marin Rift Zone Carbon 1 a bike that you would consider? Yes or no? Maybe leave me a comment. I'm always interested to hear what people's feedback is. And also let me know, does having an incandescent light bulb behind the bike make it look sexier? I keep seeing these YouTube bloggers and it seems like having one of those light bulbs behind you is like a thing that the established YouTubers do. So I put one behind a bike. Look at that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on the next video. Like, subscribe, go ride your bike more importantly than anything, and keep loving bikes. Cheers.